Welcome back to Face the Nation. For some analysis, we're joined by former Obama White House Chief of Staff and now CBS News contributor Bill Daley and Bill Kristol, the editor of the Weekly Standard. Bill Daley, I want to start with you. This news from the website, it's doing better. Is the White House, is the administration back on the good road here?
I think it's obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of relief at the White House. They know that they've got a very deep hole to come out of. Obviously, if the success that they're predicting is going to begin today by virtue of the website being up and running better is fulfilled and then grows off of that, they've taken an enormous step to begin to come back. You know, this is a game, sports analogy here would be it's singles and doubles. There are no triples or home runs to begin to change this equation. So I think this is a very solid double, but it's a long game, and they've got a lot of hits to be made by them in a positive way.
Bill Kristol, I want to talk to you about the politics of this. On the one hand, Republicans have benefited enormously from these troubles. On the other hand, Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, makes the point that you can't beat something with nothing. And so do Republicans have to kind of say, here's what, in fact, we want to do on health care?
Yeah, they do. But I think, to be fair, Republicans have benefited mostly from the substance of Obamacare. I mean, what's the big issue been for the last 3-4 weeks that Republicans have been hammering, and a lot of individuals have been hammering? If you like your plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. That doesn't change. The website could work perfectly, and 5 million people have lost their plans and are being shoved into inferior plans or ones that suit them less well. So I think that problem, I mean, the website in that respect is a bit of a distraction. We'll see how well it's been fixed. I think it's a good example of why you don't want government to do these things. I think if the private sector, if a bunch of private companies were competing, as they are, I think Aetna and Cigna and those guys, they would pay a price if the website crashed and people would go to another company. That doesn't happen with the government, which is why government shouldn't run big chunks of our economy like healthcare. And Republicans do need they have some positive alternatives. They need to highlight them more, and I think need to advance them more. I think Paul Ryan will introduce a pretty big set of Republican alternatives, not one giant bill, but let's address Medicare, Medicaid, the individual market, the corporate market, and I think he'll introduce something probably right after the new year, or at least lay out the principles of it so people can say with more comfort, and I think more truth, that Republicans do have a positive reform agenda in health care.
Bill Daley, you write in the Washington Post today about how difficult it is to manage in the federal government. So talk about that. Is this just a management problem, that it's just hard to do stuff in the federal government?
Well, it is very difficult to do such a major, complex thing for the federal government project like this. And there's plenty of examples, we cite them in the op-ed piece, of the federal government trying to do major technological changes to systems and the difficulties of that. So I think there is very much a problem of management in the federal government. This is a Democrat-Republican problem. This administration did put forward a bill to Congress on procurement reform. It's not sexy, it's not dramatic, but those are the sort of things, if you run a government and you manage it, that have to be done. And the private sector has made enormous strides. Federal government is way behind, even state and local agencies.
Now, what they say on Bill Kristol's side is that when you hire a president who's never run anything, this is what happens. What's your response to that?
No, I think anyone who thinks that the president is equivalent to a CEO who can just make changes really doesn't understand how the federal government works. You have a system that's been built over years that any president, Democrat or Republican, and I'm sure there's plenty of Republican presidents who were frustrated by the difficulties of moving major projects forward. Forgetting the legislative process, I'm just talking about the management of them. Because it's not sexy, it's not attractive. The Congress really doesn't pay attention to it except to try to make political points. And I think at some point, a president and the Congress has got to take some of these issues more seriously than they do.
Bill Kristol, Governor Scott Walker says, you know, the next president on the Republican side should be a governor because they make decisions, they have executive experience. With the health care example before us, is he right? Should senators just need not apply?
No, I think the next Republican nominee will be the person who has the best agenda for the country going forward. I think having been a successful Republican governor, especially perhaps in a state that has voted for President Obama, so it's not as easy to be a successful Republican governor in that kind of state, will be a huge credential. But being a successful governor is a credential. It's not the reason people ultimately vote for you. Think of the governors who become president: Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush. They all had national agendas. Reagan, obviously the conservative agenda; Clinton, the new Democrat agenda; George W. Bush, compassionate conservatism. They spent a lot of time thinking about what does the country need, what does the nation need. And I think the Republican governors It's fine. Scott Walker's running for re-election now. I think he'll be re-elected. But they'll need to pivot and say, this is my national agenda, not just I was a good governor in this particular state.
I guess, if I can, some people have forgotten that the last Republican nominee was a former governor. So
it's not a panacea.
It's not the end.
Let me now pivot to Iran. The administration says, you're very critical of the administration, you say they've essentially thrown away a core objective of U.S. policy. They say, but your alternative is war. I mean, that the path you're advocating is inevitably a march to war with Iran.
Well, the administration itself used to say that all options are on the table. What does that mean except for the threat of military force? Now, if the administration wants to say military force is out of the question, then they're going to make the kind of deal they just made. But if the administration is serious about the possibility that we really need to stop the nuclear program, allowing them to continue enrichment, to continue to have the centrifuges, to continue to have the Iraq heavy water plant, that's not serious about stopping the Iranian nuclear program. And as President Rouhani gloated to the Financial Times yesterday, he's 100% confident that they're not giving up their nucre program.
Bill Daley, what's your view of this?
First of all, we have to remember it was this president who got these tough sanctions, and he brought the world together to have the UN implement them. And he has said, and so has John Kerry, that military action is not off the table. Now, everyone hopes to avoid that, and there's a process here. And let's see where, if anywhere, it ends up in 6 months. And I think to not go down this path or to try to stumble it at this point only leads to one conclusion, and maybe some people want that. I don't think most people do. No question, this president understands what a problem Iran is to the world, what it has been to the United States, and understands that they will not end up with the nuclear weapons, and the president has said it.
The president had a tough time selling his policy in Syria to members of his own party in Congress. What chance does he have on this?
Well, I think he's got a pretty good chance, because I think most people do want to see this 6-month process, see if it works. And the rest of the world wants it. We are not alone in this thing. And that's an important factor also.
But giving up the sanctions without getting anything serious in return is a huge mistake. It's going to be very hard to put those back into place in 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. You already see French automakers today announce they're ready to go back into Iran on January 1st. So I think that's very problematic, at least. And secondly, we negotiated in 2009, the Obama administration negotiated with the United Arab Emirates a landmark deal. They gave up the prospect of enrichment. That was considered a great blow against nuclear proliferation, where they were going to have a nuclear program but no enrichment. To give way on enrichment, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, they're all saying, hey, are you kidding? Iran gets to enrich and we don't? I think all barriers are off then to nuclear programs around the Middle East and elsewhere.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Bill Kristol. Bill Daley. We'll be back in 1 minute with our authors panel.